Thank you, Gavin Jew. And I am now going to ask Bob Brash, who's with the Coast Forest Policy Group, to come up. He has a few things to say. I'll quickly introduce him. He has been Chief Executive of the Truck Loggers Association, but before that, and over his long career, he's been a senior executive in private, public, First Nation sectors of BC's forestry and natural resource industry, 17 years in various technical and management roles with the Ministry of Forest and Lands, 13 years with the Husby Group of companies. Past 8 years, he's been a Chief Operating Officer and CEO with Haida Enterprise Corporation. Bob, the stage is yours, and then we'll be going into the panel, which I'll introduce when you're done.
Thanks, Stuart. Good to see some familiar faces from previous lives here. So you've heard a bit about forestry today, but you're going to hear a bit more. You just heard about a group of MPs and MLAs and mayors meeting at the steps of the legislature to support the concerns, the state of affairs for the coastal forest industry. Do a bit of advertising. Hopefully I won't get in trouble for it. The TLA's having your event tonight on forestry. Kofi's having an event Wednesday, I think, Travis? Wednesday. There you are. And then Campbell River's having their event also. So I encourage each and one of you to sort of take part of those events. And we have the first slide yet? There it is. Can't see anything. I don't want those things. Oh, there we go. Oh, well, I'm going to go back. There it is. Okay, now I can get on track. Pay attention to the logos at the bottom of this slide. What you see there is folks that are manufacturers in the forest industry, folks that are licensees, folks that grind wood into pulp. You see folks that are supporting the industry by logging the volume that we have out there through the Truck Loggers Association, and of course representatives from representation from labor with the USW. I've been in this business too long, over 50 years, one way or another, over 60 some odd years if you count my dad was in the Forest Service. This is the first time I can remember a coalition of that sort in my career. And why did they get together? One reason only, that they all agree that the coast needs urgent actions to ensure our prosperity moving forward. So in the next few slides, I'll try to inform you of our challenges, but also offer you some sort of ideas that you should think about. Obviously, there's a government focus that we can all agree upon. It's like mum and apple pie, value-added, mass timber, biomaterials, housing for BC, wood. But here's the reality. You've heard the figure, I think, a few times today now. 5,400 jobs have been lost on the coast since 2002. And by the way, if my math is right, those are government statistics. And by the way, those are direct jobs, not indirect and induced jobs. 9 coastal mills have shut since 2018. 40% of the coastal pulp mill fiber is imported from outside the coast of BC. So that was only 15% a few years ago. So you can ask yourselves how sustainable that is. And then fiber sort of availability on a day-to-day basis is critically low. Once where we sort of targeted, having 2 years of, we called it standing inventory in place under permit, that's now down to about 2 or 3 months of viable wood. So just imagine the impacts of that short bit of supply or small bit of supply to workers, to the challenges of keeping those workers, to retaining the capacity to long-term deliver whatever the annual harvest is going to be, maintain customers because they want stability, and the inefficiencies of operations that are caused by that are, decided impact on our cost competitiveness, which is already high globally. And that doesn't even begin to sort of address the challenge of attracting investments needed to move our sector forward. Gotta make sure I got the right thing here. So a lot of information on chart. Really, there's only a couple things to pay attention to. The 2 shades of blue these are cutting permits that we submit provincially, not just on the coast. We couldn't get coastal specific data. Those are the cutting permits in the light blue that we submit on a yearly basis. And then the dark blues are the ones that are approved because, some are rejected for various reasons. And then you have that red line on the top is sort of the actual harvest level during the years. I think you can see a little bit of a trend, and it's downwards. You see the one sort of arrow pointing to the 45 million cubic meter target. And I will sort of be fair to everybody, the last one is the harvest only to the end of May. However, we think it'll go down again. The last few years on the coast have seen just over 8 million cubic meters out of an annual approved AAC of around 15 million. So we're, let's say easy math, just over half of what we should be. For this year, we're expecting, instead of just this 8 million cubic meters, we expect it'll be 6.5 million cubic meters. So things are not getting better. I think it's been hinted at by a few of the other presenters in various other sectors today, but obviously forestry is a key contributor to the economic viability and prosperity of our province. Again, those graphs are based on government data, and so the net government revenue that's produced per worker in the forest sector is right up there with the oil and gas guys and mining. And we are decidedly better than, I think people mentioned earlier, about coffee shops and things like that. So we, our loggers, the people that work in the forest sector, and I think when things are at full steam, we're over 100,000 people dependent on the forest sector in BC. We're a significant contributor to the province. By the way, there was a talk earlier, it's not on the slide here, about the rural-urban divide. I can't resist, and there's some graphs that were shown earlier too about public opinion polls. I know of at least 3 public opinion polls in the forest sector done independently by Ipsos and other companies over the last 3 to 4 years. Each one of them had the same conclusion. At the end of the day, about 75 to 80% of the people in the province actually support the forest sector, contrary to what you might read when you read about Fairy Creek protests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Coastal mill closures, here's a list. It's not the greatest list in the world to show you, but these are the sort of mills and facilities that have shut down on the coast over the last several years from 2008. I guess you'll have to ask yourself the question, will there be more? So, on a positive note, what needs to be done? Some of these you've heard already. I don't know who stole the lines here, Kim, whether there are lines or your lines, but anyway, there's some common threads there, obviously. But one of the most important ones is government has to accept and recognize that there's a serious problem on the coast of BC today. And why? Because urgent action, as the title on the first slide indicated, urgent action is needed now, not tomorrow. Pause legislative implementation, policy initiatives, and forestry reviews. Since 2018-19, I mean, there's basically been a flood of legislation, regulations, and policies hit the forest sector. We just need to take a breath. So just hold off. let us get our act together, what's out there right now. Launch a district level cutting permit task force, and that's been done before, because I've done it in my career before when I was with government. They work. What they end up being is a dedicated team comprised of government and industry and First Nations to sort of collectively look at the problems and try to get people back to work and get these cutting permits issued. And create district level transition plans. So whatever the future of this forest sector is going to be, whether it's an increase in harvest, because there is opportunity for that, sorry to say, whether it's a decreased harvest or whether it's a new style of forest management, whatever that is, there is multiple opportunity for an effective transition plan. And just to throw math at you, I mean, we log 1/4 of 1% of the land base any particular year. So do the math and pick a number. 5 years, 10 years, we can surely come up with an effective transition plan that does not have major impacts to communities in the forest sector. What do we need to do tomorrow is develop a long-term collective vision for the coast. And by inference, by saying that, I'm sure government has a vision, I'm sure industry has a vision, I'm sure labor has a vision, I'm sure contractors have a vision. What's our collective vision, and what do we need to do to put the steps in place to sort of agree upon what that should be? And then along with that is make sure that we align ministry mandates and legislation to coincide with that vision. It's got to be something beyond tinkering. And then we've heard this before, restore performance to BC timber sales. So that's most of the stuff I have to say before you hit the panel. You'll see in your desks, or tables, we have some fact sheets that we produced for you. They provide some further details. Of note, please be patient. Our website isn't quite up and running yet, so in a week or two it will be up there, so you'll see it then. Lastly, I think all of us are more than appreciative, especially after the things we've seen and heard in the last day or two, of the strong support that we've had from the communities that we work and live in. So on that basis, Stuart, it's back to you. I don't think you need this anymore.
Thank you, Bob Brash. And I'm going to call up those who are now joining us for the panel, which I will host. I'll take the chair nearest where I'm standing. And I would just, before I call everyone up, just quickly, for the last time before our daytime session is over, thank the sponsors, CAP, MABC, Coast Forest Policy Coalition. Those are the gold sponsors. Huge generosity to bring this together. Couldn't do it without them. Global Container Terminals will be hosting the reception a little bit later, and CAP is also a part of that. And then the silver sponsors, Tourmaline and Fortis and Cenovus and BC Council of Forest Industries and FPX Nickel and the BC Salmon Farmers and Trans Mountain. Thanks to all of those. Couldn't do it without you. And now, please take the, from the furthest seat, Jeff Bromley. Come on, Jeff, there you are. Come on up, sir. And then Peter Lister beside Jeff and Paul Sadler. Peter Lister's the Executive Director of Truck Loggers. Paul Sadler, if you take the next seat, he's CEO of Nanaimo Forest Products. And finally, Mayor Kermit Dahl, Your Worship, right next to me, please. If you're in the room. Oh, there he is. Sorry, don't have line of sight from here. All right. Alarming numbers, alarming message from Bob Brash. I'm not sure this one is alarming message. And I would like to just go to Peter Lister because Peter, you've been working on this problem hand in hand with your members. Could you just give a synopsis? I'm not sure this is doing its thing. Could we do a swap, Mayor, until that gets sorted out? Peter Lister, could you give us a bit of a synopsis of the situation as you see it right now?
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. You know, I've been in the forest industry for really my whole career, over 35 years. I've never seen it as bad as it is right now. The challenges we are facing, as a number of people have said earlier, really are a made in BC problem. The government likes to paint it as being caused by softwood lumber, by what's happening with the US, the global economy. But we are where we are today because of lack of fiber, lack of access to economic fiber. And without working forests, without access to fiber, there's no forest industry. And with no forest industry, there's no jobs, there's no taxes to pay for schools, hospitals, all those things that we rely on as a society. And so we're in a situation today where we have record deficits. It's completely unsustainable. And yet we have a solution right in front of us that we've relied on as a province for over 100 years, and that's forestry. And that is being choked off by the current government. And it's a tragedy. And it's affecting people's lives. And it's affecting all of us as British Columbians.
Jeff Bromley from USW Wood Council. You've been in this a long time, and you're here on this stage with employers, with local communities, with the independent contractors. You're standing with everyone. It's great to see. Congratulations on what you brought here, Jeff. What are your members telling you?
Well, first off, I have been in the industry for 31 years, but it's from the southeastern interior. With this, it's much different than the experience on the coast. So when I came into this position 7 years ago, it was a steep learning curve, the differences between the interior and the coastal industry, and they certainly are acute. But, and to your point, it's not, and I've told this to Bob when he invites me to the TLA conference a lot, we've never always agreed on certain things in the past, and when there's this many company folks in the room, I usually get pretty nervous, but I'm okay today, because at the end of the day, if my members, which are largely from harvesting and manufacturing across BC, 10,000 members, if the companies aren't successful, If the permits aren't offered to the companies, the tenure holders, and subsequently to the contractors, the unionized contractors, but all contractors that operate in the bush, then my members don't work, and those communities hurt. They aren't able to pay their mortgages, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that it's time, and I think by showing a solidarity of the different factions within our industry, within our communities, of the crisis that's in our industry right now, I think this demonstrates, A, the need and how bad it really is, but B, the government needs to start listening, and start listening that there are issues that we need to make sure that we have a thriving harvesting and manufacturing industry in our coastal forest industry.
And just to add one question, Jeff, because I know a lot of people will be asking you, well, you're a labor union, you have a relationship with the NDP that maybe not everyone has. Is the BC NDP government listening to you?
I'd like to say yes, but I'd be lying, I guess, to be honest with you. They listen. Whether or not they act upon what we would like them to do is something entirely different. Because again, it's no different. It's their constituents, it's my members. If we want them to be able to, the companies to be successful so that my members can work, and then from my job, I can go to the companies and try to get more money for my members and make their lives that much better. I mean, it's not a hard equation. But in terms of the policies, while there are some policies we've certainly supported, but a lot in terms of the forest policy and coastal forest policy specifically, no.
Paul Sadler, you are CEO of Nanaimo Forest Products. You actually have a great corporate story. Can you give me a mini elevator pitch, like if we're going 2 floors, about the company?
That's impossible.
Okay. That's half a floor.
Well, I've been, let's see, I've been working in the industry for about 45 years. I've worked for about 5 or 6 different employers, but I park my car in the same parking lot every year of my career. So there's been a lot of changes going on over my career in the forest industry. I was part of a company, a small American forest company that got over leveraged, involved in investing very heavily actually in sawmills in BC, and things went wrong, of course, in 2004 and 5 and 6 with the housing crisis in the US, and it led to their bankruptcy. So I was the general manager there at the time, and working with our union, working with the management team, we managed to buy the assets of the mill out of bankruptcy and started the business up with a totally new business model where the employees are investors, and the other 2 major investors are all BC-based families.
Right, so what are your owners telling you right now?
Well, that's a good question. I've got now about 350 owners that I report to every morning. They're obviously very concerned. We have a very precarious situation in our business today. We're running right on the edge. Fiber supply is everything to our business. A pulp mill can't survive on 90% available fiber. If you don't have 100% of your fiber requirements, you're out of business. So we are all, of the remaining pulp mills in BC, I started, there was 13. Today there's about, I don't know, 3 or 4, depends how you want to count them. And it's really tough for the 3 or 4 of us to keep running our operations today. So everybody's very concerned and hoping that we can see a turnaround in the fiber supply situation.
And what will those owners lose if this industry can't be saved?
Their careers. And the other, I'm thinking again, it's my employees, it's the investors in the company that every day I go to work worried about their future, and the 350 families that depend on our business running, and actually the city of Nanaimo for that matter depends on our operations. We pay about $50 million a year in wages and benefits alone. Most of that ends up in Nanaimo. We spend $350 million a year to run our operation. Almost all of that is spent in British Columbia. You know, we're very committed to BC. We all want to see success here, and we really are looking to our government to address the fiber supply situation that's become so desperate.
Thank you, Paul. Mayor Kermit Dahl, since the middle of the summer, It's now fall as of this morning, I understand. Since July, you've been quietly working with mayors all across BC. You've written to 146 municipal leaders. You've made it very clear where you stand on the plight of forestry. What have you been hearing back from around BC on the issue of forestry?
Well, it's pretty much been the same from everyone as it is for us. We've had a lot of support. The support was overwhelming. I couldn't believe how this grew so fast and got so much feedback from municipalities all across the province. Like our economic development officer says all the time, nobody called and said, hey, take me off your mailing list. Everyone was supportive and thanked us for getting this started. Lots of people, like Brad West had said this morning, had thought we needed this, but nobody had started it off. So unexpectedly, we did.
A couple of years ago, I think I looked at the impact on District of North Cowichan if they lost Western Mill, say. They would have to build 5,000 new homes and raise the taxes from those every year to cover that. Of course, that is just not going to happen in that area. What would the impact be in your community of Campbell River if you have further losses in the economic base that is forestry linked?
Well, before I say too much about that, North Cowichan's mill's been down, I think, for 2 months now, and it's planned to not start back up in the final quarter of this year, so it'll end up being down for 5 months. And the majority of the wood that they use comes from the North Island, from Campbell River North. So, for us to take much more impact, since we've already lost our sawmill and our pulp mill because they couldn't get the materials. Once the sawmill went down, they weren't next door to the pulp mill to feed the mill. So that was a real major kick.
Right. So you've already had the big loss. What is
but
it that makes you so concerned still? What's the impact on
still
Campbell
got-
River that you're so
We've got quite a few people that are still working in the bush, supplying the fiber that goes down to feed the mills that are south of us. We've got friends that are driving logging trucks and running processors. I've got friends that own logging companies that are sitting here. We got Chief Roberts and Chief Shakite and one of the owners of Holbrook Dyson Logging over there. These are all people that I talk to on a daily basis. And they'll lose their investment, but for a lot of people, their investment is their retirement.
This is really a question for anyone who could just synopsize for the group. What is the Coast Forest Policy Coalition? What do you aim to achieve, and why have you come forward now?
I can take a stab at that. The coalition is really about having a single voice to government about what the issues are facing the coast. I think the industry is very, very integrated. Each piece of it is very important, and all of us require each piece to be economically healthy for the other pieces to work. And so we all have the same issue. It doesn't matter if we're representing loggers, labor, pulp mills, sawmills. As I said earlier, without fiber, there's no forest industry. And that is our challenge today. And it is a made in BC problem, as I said earlier. And, we are going through what I would describe as a social engineering phase in BC, where our government is working hard to address the poor treatment of First Nations people in the past and the unfair treatment that they had. And I think the industry is very supportive of reconciliation in general and sharing the wealth of the land base with First Nations peoples. There's been tremendous progress. Many of the companies, people here today, have been personally involved in building meaningful business partnerships. There's been a lot of leadership from the nations themselves that I'm 100% supportive of. But this type of transition takes a lot of time, and while we've made some good progress, there's a long way left to go. And we need government to ensure that during this transition, that the fiber keeps flowing, and that the investments that we have, whether you're a harvesting contractor, a pulp mill owner, or a big solid wood producer, that those facilities remain in business. Because if they don't, they're not coming back. No one is going to invest $3.5 billion to build a new pulp mill in BC, given the uncertainty around fiber supply. And so we need government to work with industry, to work with municipalities, and to work with the nations to get us through this transition. And we will get through it. We can do it if we work together. But the approach today is largely to throw the problems into the laps of nations, industry, and say, go figure it out. And that's not working.
Are there any examples of where it is working, where there's one particular location and you can say that's what we should be doing more of?
Absolutely. We have one right here in Campbell River, Chief Checkite. And what Wewakai is doing is a great example of how reconciliation is working. And Western is working with the band and others, and trying to get more forest licenses into the hands of nations, and developing meaningful partnerships, and helping support the growth of economic prosperity for nations. So that's great. That is a great promise that forestry has. But it's complicated. It takes time. And, we need support through the transition.
Jeff, could I just go back to you? You're here this week. You will have the chance probably to get the ear of some key people in government. What will you be saying?
Actually, I just came from a review or a debrief of the BCTS review announcement that's coming tomorrow, and there's a lot there. There's 54 recommendations from the 3-person panel, and there's some really good recommendations in there. And the key will be that if those recommendations are acted upon in a timely manner, that we see results. If they, are not acted upon and then sit on a shelf somewhere, or the urgency isn't there, then we're still going to be faced with the same problems. So if they're working hard to come up with solutions, and I applaud that, but we need to put those solutions into action, or it's going to be a point where we're going to see more mills close, another pulp mill close. And we're going to see contractors that have iron at Ritchie's Brothers, Auction Brothers, rather than in the bush. I mean, we're at that precipice right now on the coast. And they need to put the urgency that many people have been telling them into action.
Paul, what is the horizon in a quarterly sense? A quarter, half a year? How many quarters before this really bites your business and your owners are left out?
We spend a lot of time looking at fiber supply forecasts, and frankly, I'd say in the next 4 to 6 months, a lot of the mills on the coast, or several of the mills on the coast, are going to be running out of fiber to be able to run at full capacity. So the timeline is in front of us right now. I go back about four or 5 years ago, we were buying about 8% of our fiber in Washington State. It was convenient along the coastline there to import chips. Today, we're having to go more and more and more into the US. We're importing chips as far south as California, and we're now importing about 25% of our fiber supply. So that's the way we're solving our imminent problems. We're employing a lot of U.S. foresters, loggers, truck drivers, you name it. 500,000 cubic meters alone for just our business. So we're talking, there's likely very many millions of cubic meters of wood flowing into the pulp mills in BC, and it's a big problem that's in front of us, right there.
Mayor Dahl, earlier today, it was revealed that the Alliance for Resource Communities is going to be fully brought out on Wednesday. Today, we're learning, for me, for the first time, the details of what you're doing with the Coast Forest Policy Project. These seem very aligned. It sounds like communities are getting together. I haven't seen this maybe for over a quarter of a century where there's been this degree of communities, companies saying kind of the same thing. So is that going to work? Are you convinced that the mayors coming together across BC through the Alliance, this research and information you have shared by individuals like yourselves is going to tip the balance? And before you answer that, I just want to say we do have time for a question. There's probably 10 people out there who've got 10 times better questions than I've got, and we've got a few minutes for that. So after whatever you have to say about this, I would like to turn to the audience, so have a think about that. Mayor?
Well, it's going to be better than doing nothing, and that's pretty much what we've been doing. You know, I want to say something about this BC timber sale thing. You know, we bring all of the mayors together so that we can force our voices to be heard. The BC timber sales review that's being discussed there was 3 hours of consultation with all of the municipalities that are resource-based around logging. 3 hours. There's well over 100 different communities whose tax base depends on logging. And all of those collectively got 3 hours of consultation time from the provincial government. So you can divvy that up any way you want, but 3 hours is 180 minutes. So this is the kind of stuff that I hope that everybody coming together and speaking will put an end to. There's a lot of people in these communities that live and have lived on the logging industry, aquaculture, each one, mining, that are not getting a voice, and they could shed light on a lot of the issues that are coming that get overlooked because they don't have a voice. They don't get the opportunity to say, hey, wait a minute, you know, that's not going to work and this is why.
Anyone? On how are you going to make this successful?
Okay, how are we going to make this successful? I was involved in the BC Pulp and Paper Coalition as co-chair for quite a few years recently, and you know, we've invested actually a lot of time, 10 years in fact, the coalition's been meeting with Ministry of Forest staff, explaining the extent of the problems, and the pace of improvement or changes has been glacial. It's just, we are really, a lot of dialogue, a lot of receptiveness to getting together to talk, but it's been extremely challenging to move the needle on getting more fiber supply. So we have had access to ministry staff. It's been great. You know, we've had support from many of the members within our coalition group, within the Ministry of Forest. But at the end of the day, without some serious policy changes, I think we're going to just have to keep on pushing the way we are today, and that's bring the points forward to the public.
Now, if anyone's got a question, I'm prepared to do the full Dr. Phil and come over to where you are, so put your hand up if you do. Yes.
So I do have a question for Jeff. So my name is Ronnie Chikite. I'm the elected chief of the Weavekai First Nation, heavily invested in forestry. We purchased 175,000 meters off of Interfor last year. We've also owned 150 15,000 meters in Western as well. You know, I've heard a lot today about reconciliation, how First Nations are working together. This whole panel is up here. I've had Peter come out to our cut area a couple months back, had the minister come out there. But the one thing that is driving First Nations down right now, especially Chief Roberts is sitting over there, him and I own the largest share of the Western deal. Nations invested over $20 million. We're being held up by the union. Why? Because of non-union contractors, ourselves, who have that ability already, a deal that the union signed with Western, and we aren't, you know, our company's been shut down for 3.5 months. For what reason? We're not talking wages. We're literally talking about the ability of First Nations people who may want to go to work. My nation's the only one of the 4 partnerships who owns a logging company. We are so busy right now doing our own cut and other cuts for Mosaic and other things, we aren't going after the Western work. We have the ability because the contract says that, but the union is denying us from making money. So my question for you is, what are you, like, why? Why are you guys shutting us down?
If you would sign up to be members of the union, then you wouldn't be denied. So listen, I understand where you're coming from. There's a couple of comments that I'll make on your statement that, besides the contracting out issue that you mentioned, and I'll circle back to that. First off, the pattern agreement that was signed with the United Steelworkers by Western, who is now, it was a 6-year pattern agreement, really good improvements of wages, lots of good things. That was signed by the sawmill Duke Point. Used to be Mid-Island before the Nanowakolis Council bought in a few years ago, but it was Mid-Island would have been part of that. But all the Duke Point, the Chemainus, Calvé, all those mills are part of that agreement. Now, Terminal Forest Products over on the mainland, Olympic Forest Products, they're all part of that pattern. And the way we bargain is that the wages and terms and conditions of employment across the unionized workforce on the coast is almost identical and relatively same. What's the issue in terms of that particular strike is because 2 things. A, the contracting out, or the ability to try and introduce non-union contractors where that's never happened before to that particular operation, so A. And B, the terms and condition, the wages and the collective agreement that we're proposing have not been agreed to. It's not just the contracting out. The terms and wages are also outstanding. So that's a bit of a misnomer at that point. It's not been agreed to.
Not agreed to by us?
At the bargaining table. That part's not, I'm not saying yourself personally, but your bargaining agent that hasn't been agreed to yet.
The contract currently says that we have the ability to, and you guys are choosing not to. So when it says, how can the forest sector be saved? Well, you go back to work, and then, so we can all start making some money. Because the trickle-down effect is affecting that mill as well, and all the stores like Kermit as well that we use for logging companies. Like, you know, right now I'm looking at it as a First Nations issue. Why they're not working.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I understand that looking at it from First Nations perspective, I'm looking at it from a labor relations issue. So, and let's take this to the next step, perhaps even a logical next step. Duke Point Sawmill, I'll pick on Western. Let's say that the nations, or a group of nations buy a limited into that, and we can make it a limited partnership. So the next round of collective bargaining, then, do you make the demand that you can introduce contractors in there in place of our members? Or do you apply a different set of health and welfare, health and safety rules, because you look at it from a different lens, or employment standards, or whatever the case may be? So this is listen, it's not in my opinion, it's not a rights and title issue. It is a labor relations issue, pure and simple. In that particular area, for Mid-Island Western, or the former Mid-Island Western, it's always been logged unionized crews. And the introduction of non-unionized crews is a major change. And no question, 6 years ago in 2019, we had a very long 7-month strike with Western. Again, I'll pick on Western, and because they were trying to make major changes to our pension. They were trying to introduce more contracting out. We had to take a stand, and we ended up fixing it. And it took some pain, for sure. It's not fun. We want our members to go back to work. I understand. I met with Western today. I know the particular issue with Duke Point, and the fact is that it's not a good situation. But we are between a rock and a hard place in that situation.
Thank you. That's all we have time for. Thanks for that candid answer, Jeff, and thanks to this panel. We do have to conclude things because the Union Club staff needs to turn the room and have someone else in here in an hour. But in 1 hour at 5 o'clock, we will be convening.